A young boy, a borrowed buffalo, a courtroom of scholars waiting for him to fail. He'd been called an outcast since before he could talk, and tradition holds that when he placed his hand on that animal's back, it began reciting ancient Vedic verses, word for word. This is the story of Gyaneshwar, and the buffalo wasn't even the strangest thing he'd go on to do. If stories like this are your thing, hit subscribe, you won't want to miss what's next. To understand how a young boy ended up performing miracles in front of men who despised him, we have to go back to before he was even born, to a decision his father made that would one day cost his parents their lives. In the 13th century, a young Brahmin named Pant left his wife behind and took vows of sannyas, becoming a wandering ascetic in search of God. When his guru discovered Pant was still a married man, he gave an order that broke every rule twice over. Go back, live as a householder, and raise a family after all. Pant obeyed. He and his wife, Rukmini, had 4 children: Nivritti, Gyaneshwar, Sopan, and a daughter, Muktabai. But in the eyes of their town, those children were born already disgraced, the offspring of a monk who broke his vows. The local Brahmin refused the children their sacred thread ceremony, the ritual that marked a boy's place in Vedic society. Without it, they weren't fit to study scripture, sit at the same table, or even be seen as fully born. Pant and Rukmini believed there was only one way left to lift the curse from their children's names. They walked to the Ganga at Prayag and ended their own lives, hoping their deaths would purify what their marriage had supposedly ruined. It didn't. The Brahmin of Paithan still refused the 4 orphan children any place among them. Their parents' sacrifice had bought them nothing. So the children did something almost unthinkable. They walked to Paithan themselves, to stand before the very assembly that had condemned them and ask for a certificate of purification. The assembled priests laughed. Scripture, they said, belonged to those born pure, not to the children of a broken vow. If young Gyaneshwar wanted to prove otherwise, let him show it. Tradition holds that Gyaneshwar did exactly that. He touched the buffalo and it began reciting Vedic hymns aloud. Proof, he said, that the truth inside every living being is the same, with or without a sacred thread. Stunned into silence, the assembly granted the children an official document proving they'd been cleansed and could rejoin society, a certificate of purification. But a piece of paper couldn't undo years of being told they didn't belong. The buffalo, it turns out, was only the opening act. Gyaneshwar didn't have long left to live, and he was about to spend every remaining year rewriting what an outcast could accomplish. In time, Jnaneshwar came to believe that proving his own worth with one miracle was never going to be enough. If the knowledge locked inside ancient scripture only belonged to a select few, real change meant giving that knowledge to everyone. Under his elder brother Nivritti's guidance, the boy the town had once refused to educate became one of the sharpest minds Indian philosophy would ever produce. Around the age of 15, he composed the Dnyaneshwari, a full commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, not in the Sanskrit of temples and scholars, but in plain Marathi, so ordinary people could finally read what had always been kept just out of their reach. Keep in mind, he was barely 15. While most teenagers are still figuring out who they are, Gyaneshwar was busy rewriting the spiritual map of an entire subcontinent. He followed it with the Amritanubhav, a work that tried to describe something words were never built for: what it actually feels like when the self dissolves into the absolute. Legend adds a stranger footnote. When a wandering yogi named Changdev challenged Gyaneshwar's spiritual authority, Gyaneshwar is said to have ridden a stone wall across the ground to meet him. animating the lifeless to make a point the living couldn't argue with. He and his contemporary Namdev laid the groundwork for what became the Varkari tradition, the same devotional movement that, 3 centuries later, would carry a grocer named Tukaram to Pendrapur. By 21, Gyaneshwar had already written what he came to write. He announced to his family that he intended to leave his body while still alive, fully conscious by his own choice. Years after that buffalo first spoke in his defense, Gyaneshwar entered an underground chamber at Alandi, sat in meditation, and took what is called Jeevit Samadhi, a willed departure rather than an ordinary death. His siblings sealed the chamber behind him. That chamber is still there. Every year, Varkari pilgrims visit his Samadhi at Alandi before continuing on to Pendrapur, treating the beginning of their journey as inseparable from the boy the priests once tried to erase. They told him scripture wasn't his to touch. He spent the rest of history making sure no one could ever say that to anyone else again. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and join us for more tales from Kathavana, stories that outlive time.